Hey everyone, this is Let's Get Practical with Daryl Girardier, and today we're talking about how far out you should plan your church's marketing. Let's do this. Welcome to Let's Get Practical. This podcast is about church communications from a practical standpoint. It's about what works and what doesn't. It's about helping you cut through all the clutter and noise and getting straight to the point. And today we're getting straight to the point on how far out you should plan your church's marketing. Now, I know a lot of us, we want to plan ahead, and you're in the middle of a new year and you want to kind of think in advance. You probably have big, grand ideas and plans, things you want to do. And so you want to start planning those things out way in advance. So the question is though, how far out should you plan this kind of stuff? The marketing, any big ideas you may have to promote summer events, even maybe next Christmas, Easter, all those things. How far out should you be thinking about those things? So I'm going to kind of give you a roadmap for how I think you should approach it. It's a little bit of a modification on what we currently do where I'm at. And so hopefully it gives you a framework that you can work out of. Now, a couple of things you need to know, and I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, is that the place I currently serve, at our church, we plan all of our sermons a year in advance. So I kind of know where we're headed thematically speaking from a worship standpoint. So when I say we plan our sermons out a year in advance, every June or July, we get together with all of the campus pastors and we map out what the following year will look like. And so that means pretty much in about June 2018, we got together and we planned all of 2019. So that means that we know the passages, I know the scripture and the passages. I know the titles of the sermons. I know how long the series are going to be. If it's going to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And I kind of have usually a summary paragraph for each Sunday that I kind of know thematically where we're going to go. So I will have that document that is in a draft form until probably late October, early November. Then it's kind of solidified that this is the final version and it's kind of locked in place. And at that point, we're just slightly tweaking it as the year goes along in terms of maybe a passage here may change or maybe a little description may change. We may change titles along the way because we think we got a better title. But for the most part, it's kind of locked in. So I have that already set in place. Now, that doesn't affect the marketing per se, but it definitely kind of gives me a roadmap of where the worship services are going to go. So that kind of can help me out in terms of all of this planning. So I do have that going for me in terms of that. But you don't need to have that done in order to figure out how to plan your marketing ahead. It's just one of those things that's nice to have. And if you can get that, great. If you can't, don't sweat it. You can still plan ahead with your marketing. So the question is how far out should you plan your promotion and your marketing for your church? How far out should you be thinking about stuff? When is it you thinking too far? What does that look like? I recommend, as a good rule of thumb, that 90 days out is how you should be planning your marketing. So you should know the next 90 days for what you're going to be promoting as a church. And so that's essentially the next 3 months. Think of it this way. I'm breaking it down, and you need to know the next 12 Sundays, roughly about the next 12 Sundays worth of content. What are you going to be promoting at a church? Now, here's the reason why I picked 90 days. One, it's not too far out. We know that if you go like 6 months out, even 9 months out, or a year out, you're going to run into a big problem because details and things change. Events may change. You may not do an event. You may all of a sudden have an event pop up on your calendar you didn't know about. So I think 90 days is roughly a good approximation of, giving you a good idea of what's coming down the road. Most of that stuff is pretty solidified. It may still have some details that are moving around, but for the most part, you kind of know what's happening in roughly a 3-month window at your church. Now, keep in mind also that I also have, not only do I have my sermons planned a year in advance, I've also got a calendar with all of our major events solidified a year in advance. So in other words, what I'm saying is I have like Easter's mapped out, VBS dates are picked out, Christmas is already picked out, a couple of big key things. So I am working on a longer framework like that. For the most part, majority of the stuff hits around a 90-day window. And so again, I think almost think of it 12 Sunday increments. And that really kind of, I think, works best again, because when you go so far out and you're thinking 6 months from now, we're going to do this thing, things can change. Your resources may change. You may lose a staff member. You may gain staff members. You may have budget cuts. There's a whole lot of things can happen. Your printer breaks down. All of a sudden, you got to use the money you were going to spend on this on the printer. So you've got a lot of those things can happen really quick that changes and alters the course. So the more I can tighten that window up in terms of planning, the better off I'm actually going to be delivering on some of the big ideas that we have as a team. So I want to think about 90-day windows. So when I do that, I'm also thinking through the fact that when I'm dealing with other ministries, say it's like a student ministry or children's ministry, when I go to them 90 days out for something I know they've got coming down the road, I know about 90 days out is when they start really probably thinking about that thing. They're probably not thinking too far much out beyond that. So that's the other aspect of it is I could end up, if I plan 6 months out to like say promote student camp, the problem is that the reality is that those things could change. The dates may not change, but the theme may change. The look and the feel may change. A whole lot of other stuff can change. So there's no sense in me trying to plan that far out. And also, they themselves may not even be thinking about that event. They may say like, you know what, it's in June, but we really don't start thinking about it until like April or March. Well, there's no sense in me in January doing my planning. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's better off that I kind of get in sync with their timeline and plan with them. So the fact that we're on the same pathway, if I get too far ahead of them, I'm going to end up doing work that could be probably tossed out. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's not really a good use of my resources. So I want to I think a 90-day window is typically how most ministries are thinking in terms of thinking far out in terms of their major events. Now, I say that with a caveat that we all know we've got that one ministry that probably thinks a week out at most. They'll come to you on like the Friday before something or even Saturday evening before the following Sunday, the next Sunday's next day. And they may say, oh, we forgot, we need to promote this thing. Can you do something for us? In fact, I just had an email exchange with a ministry who said, hey, we need this for Sunday. And it was Thursday and I was about to jet for the weekend. And, they had this last minute thing that they just had to have for their Sunday. And so, quickly what I had to do, I had to turn around and just kind of pull all that together for them. So you're going to have that happen. That's going to be a thing that's going to happen. Now, the advantage is if you're planning 90 days out, you can also build out some wiggle room for the fact that that's probably going to happen. You know who the people are who are going to do those types of things. They're the people who aren't going to plan well, aren't going to think through stuff. You know who those are. So by planning 90 days out, you can also build in a little bit of gap time of, I know for a fact that these ministries are probably going to be in my problems areas. I can work with them to try to get them to think longer term down the road. But the reality is that, I want to kind of anticipate that problem coming down the road, which it probably will. Now, here's the other thing with a 90-day plan. The other thing is you don't need to keep that 90-day plan to yourself. You need to bring in as many people as possible on the 90-day plan. That may be your church leadership. That may be coworkers, other ministries. You want to bring in as many people possible to speak into it. So the fact that everybody's got a clear roadmap of where the church is heading in 90 days. That's really, really important because if you can get leadership's buy-in on a 90-day plan, then you feel a lot better and you feel a lot more secure in that what you're doing is the right thing that you need to be doing in that moment. If you just keep it to yourself and you have your internal 90-day plan and you don't share with anybody, then the reality is you're just creating this little walled garden by which you are working out of it. Nobody else knows what's going on. And then all of a sudden you create this work for this thing and you're just not communicating with everybody else. And things can go sideways really fast. So I would tell you over communicate on it. It may take people a while to get used to the idea of planning in advance, but you want to over communicate this plan as well. The other thing you want to do with it, if you're thinking through 90 days out, what you want to be doing is you want to turn around and make sure that those 90 days lines up with your project management tool. So hopefully you're managing all of your work in some sort of project management tool that also tracks your time and tracks basically what you're doing, because you want to use that, we've talked about this before, you want to use that as a way by which you can ask for more resources based off of showing people how much time you spend on certain things. It also gives you a measurement of what ministries are taking up your time. But I want to take this 90-day plan and I want to almost overlay it on top of my project management list and say, what is missing? If I know these things are coming down in the next 90 days, guess what? There have not been requests made for some of the stuff that's coming down the next 90 days because I don't see them on my projects list. So I'm going to either hunt down those ministers and say, hey, look, I see you got this event coming, but you haven't asked for anything for this event. What do you need? Or I may just turn around and say, I know what they need. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the plan. I'll go back and communicate to them later. But I'm going to compare the two and make sure those two things line up. Because when they're congruent, when they're completely lined up, then I've got a really good roadmap of I know what's coming and I know exactly what I need to do to actuate on those things that are coming down the road. But I want to make sure those two things are lined up. A caveat to this whole conversation in regards to this is I know that if you're listening to this and you're a church that's smaller, 90 days out may be a little harder, specifically if you got bivocational team members. You may be bivocational, and in other words, you do this job, you do church communications for 20 hours a week, or you're just a volunteer. So you're thinking, Daryl, I can't really do 90 days out. In that case, I would say shoot for 45 days, shoot for 30 to 45 days to build up to 90 days. This is going to be a thing that's kind of like a muscle that you're going to have to build. So if you're at a place by which this is a really foreign concept of planning this far out, I would say work really hard on maybe starting with like a 30-day window, then work it up to 45, 60, 75, then 90. But you're going to have to work your way up there. But I completely understand when you come in, you get to a first-time situation by which none of this is set up, to throw a 90-day window on there may be a lot for some people to kind of like chew all, to bite off, if you will, and to think through. So don't be afraid to just scale it back and say, you know what, how about we just focus on the next 30 days? What do we have going on for the next 4 Sundays? And I think everybody can wrap their mind around the next 4 Sundays, and then slowly increase and say, all right, now we're going to think about what we've got going on for the next 6 Sundays. And slowly over time, you kind of build that up until you get to a healthy 90-day window. So if you're listening to this podcast, you're thinking, Daryl, that's just not achievable for me. It is achievable for you. You just need to slowly build up for it. And once you do that, you'll be good to go, and you'll feel a lot better. You'll sleep better at night. You'll wake up in the morning when you go to work. You'll know exactly what you need to be doing. You know what's coming down the road, and you'll have a great clarity for what is going on with your world and your work. So hopefully that'll provide that. I think it will if you stick to this and make this happen. So there you go. 90 days out. That's how far I believe you should be planning out your church marketing. That's how far out I think you should do it. I think anything longer than that, you end up wasting energy. Anything shorter than that, and you could end up honestly not giving yourself enough time to actually do things and execute things well. So I think 90 days is right around the perfect window for that. And again, if you think, man, 90 days is a big ask for my church, you know what? Scale it back to maybe 30 days and then work yourself up to 90. You can try that as well. So there you go. That is how far out you should plan your church's marketing. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you like this podcast, give us a ratings on iTunes. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe on iTunes as well, or your favorite podcasting app. Until next week, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.